Have you ever sat in a room full of people your age and felt different? Like somehow you skipped a stage. While everyone else is laughing about trends, gossip, or the latest viral drama, you're quietly thinking about the future, about responsibility, about meaning. Maybe you've even been told you're so mature for your age, and at first it sounded like a compliment. But over time it started to feel isolating, like you were aging faster on the inside than the calendar suggests. Why does that happen? Why do some people feel older than their age? Not physically, but psychologically. And why can that feeling be both a strength and a quiet burden at the same time? Let me show you something interesting. When we talk about age, we usually mean biological age, the number of years since you were born. But psychologists make a distinction between that and subjective age, which is how old you feel internally. And research shows that subjective age can influence everything from mental health to decision-making to how you relate to others. In other words, your inner age can quietly shape your entire life. Picture a child who grows up in a household where chaos is the norm. Maybe they had to take care of younger siblings. Maybe they became the emotional mediator between parents. Maybe they learned early that being childish wasn't safe or acceptable. That child doesn't just grow older, they grow up fast. Psychologists sometimes call this parentification, where a child takes on adult responsibilities prematurely. It forces the brain to prioritize vigilance, responsibility, and emotional regulation earlier than usual. Now here's the twist. The brain adapts. It always does. When your environment demands maturity, your neural pathways reorganize around survival and competence. You become observant, cautious, thoughtful. You start scanning for risks instead of chasing thrills. Over time, that wiring feels like your personality, but underneath it, there's often a story. And it's not always trauma. Sometimes it's temperament. Some people are simply wired to be more introspective. Studies on personality traits, like those within the Big Five model, show that people high in conscientiousness and low in impulsivity often report feeling older than their peers. They value structure, long-term thinking, and stability. While others are experimenting recklessly, they're planning. While others are reacting, they're reflecting. Think about it like this. If most people your age are surfing waves, you're studying the tide charts. It's not that one approach is better, they're just different rhythms of being. But here's where it gets complicated. Feeling older than your age can create a strange kind of loneliness. You might struggle to relate to peers who seem carefree or spontaneous. You might feel impatient with what looks like immaturity. And at the same time, you might feel invisible to older people who still see you as young. It's like being psychologically between worlds. There's also something called future time perspective. People who feel older often think long-term. They're aware, sometimes hyper-aware, of time passing. While others think, I have years to figure it out. You might think, I need to get serious now. That awareness can fuel ambition and responsibility, but it can also steal lightness. You may feel pressure to have everything sorted out before you've even fully experienced youth. Let's talk neuroscience for a moment, but in simple terms. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and foresight, continues developing into your mid-20s. But development doesn't happen in isolation. Stress, responsibility, and environment can accelerate certain functional patterns. If your brain repeatedly practices restraint, problem-solving, and emotional control, those circuits strengthen. It's like going to the gym, but for seriousness. So, when you feel older than your age, it's not imaginary. It's your brain reflecting the patterns it's practiced most. There's also a philosophical layer to this. Some people feel older because they've confronted existential questions early. Maybe you've thought deeply about mortality, purpose, or meaning, while your peers were focused on short-term pleasures. Once you start asking those bigger questions, who am I? What does this life mean?
It's hard to go back to surface-level thinking. You can laugh, you can have fun, but something inside you is always searching. And yet, here's something beautiful. Feeling older often comes with emotional depth. You may be the friend people come to for advice, the one who listens carefully, the one who doesn't panic easily. There's a steadiness in you, a gravity. That's not a flaw. That's strength forged early. But I also want to gently acknowledge the shadow side. Sometimes feeling older is connected to emotional suppression. You learned to be the strong one, the reliable one, the mature one. And maybe you didn't always get space to be messy, playful, or unsure. Over time, that can create an internal divide. Outwardly composed, inwardly tired. If that resonates, I want you to hear this clearly. Maturity is not the same as self-denial. Being wise doesn't mean you can't be light. Depth and playfulness can coexist. In fact, psychological flexibility, the ability to move between seriousness and spontaneity, is one of the strongest indicators of well-being. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine life is a piano. Some people spend years only playing the high notes, fun, excitement, novelty. Others, especially those who feel older than their age, may spend a lot of time in the low notes, reflection, responsibility, realism. Both are music, but a full life, it uses the whole keyboard. So, what can you do if you've always felt older than your age? First, understand that it likely developed for a reason. Your brain adapted intelligently. It learned what it needed to learn. Instead of judging yourself for being too serious, get curious. What experiences shaped this? What strengths did it give you? What might it have cost you? Self-awareness is powerful. When you realize that your inner age is partly a story your brain constructed to survive or thrive, you gain choice. You can keep the wisdom and slowly experiment with reclaiming lightness. That might mean allowing yourself to try something just for fun, saying yes to something unplanned, letting yourself be bad at something without attaching it to your identity. And here's another reframe. Feeling older doesn't mean you're ahead or behind. It just means your psychological timeline unfolded differently. Some people bloom through experience. Others bloom through reflection. Both are valid paths. There's also evidence that subjective age can shift. People who engage in playful activities, build new skills, and surround themselves with diverse age groups often report feeling more balanced internally. The brain is dynamic. Your sense of self isn't frozen. You're not locked into being the mature one forever. And maybe the real question isn't, why do I feel older than my age? Maybe it's, how can I integrate all parts of myself? The thoughtful planner and the spontaneous explorer, the responsible adult and the curious child. Integration is growth, not regression. Think about someone like a young, old soul in literature, the kind of character who sees the world clearly but still learns to laugh along the way. That's not a contradiction, that's depth with dimension. If you've always felt older, maybe it's because you noticed things early. Maybe you felt deeply. Maybe you carried more than others saw. And that awareness shaped you, but it doesn't have to confine you. You're allowed to rest from being the mature one. You're allowed to experience joy without analyzing it. You're allowed to not have everything figured out. And here's something quietly empowering. People who feel older often grow into incredibly grounded adults because they've already practiced reflection, empathy, and foresight. When life inevitably becomes complex, as it does for everyone, they're not shocked by it. They've been rehearsing for years. So instead of seeing your inner age as something strange or isolating, consider it a layer of your identity, a layer that gave you insight, a layer that can now soften. As you move forward, maybe ask yourself gently, where can I let myself feel lighter? Where can I honor my depth without being weighed down by it? Those questions alone can begin to rebalance your inner world. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know, have you always felt older than your age, Or did something specific shift that feeling? Sometimes just sharing that story helps you see it more clearly. And if exploring the psychology behind experiences like this helps you understand yourself in a deeper way, consider sticking around. There's something powerful about realizing that the way you feel isn't random. It's human, it's shaped, and it can evolve. At the end of the day, age isn't just a number. It's a narrative your brain writes based on experience, responsibility, temperament, and meaning. And the beautiful part? You're still the author.